and welcome to the Source Radio Network, Jazz Confusion Power Hour. My name is Mel Albin, and I'll be your host tonight. And I want to tell you a little bit about Source Radio briefly. Source Radio has a mission, and the mission is twofold. We bring jazz to everybody. We call it Jazz Confusion. It's jazz crossover. It's jazz reggae, jazz gospel, jazz soul, jazz R&B, jazz country, jazz rock. And we really are promoting jazz, which is more and more difficult to find these days on radio. In addition to that, we have a mission that we're also trying to build small Black and minority businesses that we consider part of the invisible economy, small businesses that you just don't see, but need to have recognition and need to have radio time to be able to get the message out to people that they're alive and well, and that people should buy Black and buy small. So that's the purpose of the radio station. Along the way, we developed the Jazz Confusion Power Hour, and we interview really an incredible array of artists who are either musicians, singer-songwriters, vocalists, but always connected to jazz in some way. Tonight we're very lucky to have Jeff Bradford. Jeff Bradshaw is a tremendous artist, and he is unique because he actually plays a trombone, and he's played with many artists that he'll tell you about when I'm going to bring him on in a minute. But I want you to really listen to his story because every artist has a story to tell, and the story is really what lies behind the music, and it explains how they went about honing their craft and rising to the top. It's not easy. Music has changed dramatically. So, with that, I don't want to take up any more time. So, I'm going to bring Jeff on and welcome Jeff. Welcome, Jeff. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for having me.
A pleasure. I'm really glad that we can have you on tonight. I was just telling the audience that music has changed a lot over the years, and we bring jazz to everybody, and we want to bring special artists to make a unique contribution to the field of jazz and jazz crossover. And you're one of those special people, and we're glad to have you on. And we want people to understand your story and what makes your music unique and important. So, let me start off by saying that you're the first trombonist I've had on this show.
Oh, thank you.
So you have a unique distinction. I understand that when you were a child, your father was a big influence on you musically. Is that correct?
Absolutely. You can see him over my show. That's my dad, a portrait that was done by an artist named uh, S. Dot Art out of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. But my father taught me to play trombone in church. That's how I learned to play trombone. I was self-taught. My father was a youth minister, but he was a multi-instrumentalist. He could play trombone, trumpet, tuba, and guitar. He had a great singing voice as well. And I was born and raised in a church called United House of Prayer for All People, where like gospel brass bands were the feature of the music ministry. So you figured, it's almost like New Orleans in church.
Gotcha.
So it's New Orleans in church,
Gotcha.
dominated by trombones, though. Mostly trombones, baritone horn, a few saxophones here and there, and sousaphone. So it kind of is like New Orleans in church, but uh, he was my inspiration, my number one inspiration. He taught me to play trombone um, like a singer because the way I learned was unconventional. He taught me to play the words of old gospel songs. His eyes is on a sparrow. Amazing grace. These great old
Right.
um, gospel spirituals. He taught me to play the words of the songs. So, like most instrumentalists, they learn to play their instruments by learning scales, and
Right.
trombone is position 1 through 7, and you ba da 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 ba da 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 da. But that's not the way I learned. I learned to play trombone by Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. Those were the first the first things that I learned to play on trombone before I learned the positions, which I did obviously learn the instrument. It was the songs. It was the old Negro spirituals, the old gospel songs were the original things that I started from the very beginning. Those were the very first things that I played on trombone. And so that's why my sound, anybody that's ever heard my music, or people that will hear my music, maybe after this, after this interview, people will go and listen to my music and hear that I have a sound that's like no other, because the trombone is an extension of my voice. I sing with the trombone.
I think that's really a fascinating introduction. As a kid, um, was trombone something you really wanted to play, or for a lot of kids, it's not the sexiest instrument
No,
around.
no. It's funny you should say that, because trombone was not the instrument I wanted to play. I started as a drummer in the band. I started playing drums in the band, and everybody loves drums. I started playing drums in the band, but then as I got older, watching my father play his trombone, leading the band, and walking up and down the middle aisles and walking all over the church, playing these beautiful melodies to the high heavens, I eventually graduated or gravitated to the instrument because of the way he played it. It was something about, and I'm talking about in a church where trombone was a very common instrument. It was more trombones than anything. There
Wow.
was
Okay.
something about the way my father sang with the trombone that made me want to play it. And I play play drums and trumpet and baritone horn and sousaphone, and I play all of those instruments as well. But it was something about the way he played it that made me really want to play the instrument. And then, of course, my father introduced me to, soul music and funk music and jazz. And once I heard Fred Wesley,
Right.
I knew that I wanted to play this instrument. And I not just wanted to play it, I wanted to play it in a way that had never been played before, because I was inspired by so many. After hearing, Slide Hampton and J.J. Johnson and
Sure.
Curtis Fuller, after hearing these great men play this instrument along with my father, I knew that it was an instrument that I wanted to play, but I wanted to revolutionize the instrument by playing it in a way that had never been played before.
Great.
And make it sexy.
Aside from the fact that you're a tremendous musician, you're also a songwriter. Musicians come to song differently than vocalists come to songwriting. How do you approach a song? I mean, do you think about the lyrics first? Do you think about the music first? Do you think about your particular instrument and how the song will grow from that sound? Or how do you approach songwriting?
Every song I've ever written was about some form of spiritual feeling or hurt or love or pain, like any other songwriter. Songs come from places, emotional places, in our subconscious. A lot of times, if I hear a beat, I can write a song. I can read, but excuse me, most of it came from personal experiences, be it good or bad, joy and pain, you know, or just a really funky beat or really funky groove. I hear melodies and words uh, in those spaces.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was asking you. Do you hear the words first or the melodies first, or is there no set pattern when you start to create?
Well, songwriting is like telling a story,
Right.
and I have many, I, I have many stories that I could tell, but it's really about storytelling, and when it comes to hearing the groove and the beat, you just you figure out rhythmically how to tell the story through a really, really good melody.
So I guess for you, it's the melody, it's the soul in the melody, and the lyrics come
Excuse me.
afterwards, or
For me,
yeah,
it all depends on the song. If it's a mid or an up tempo song, a lot of times the beat comes first.
okay,
I'll just
right,
I'll just produce a beat and we'll have a drummer play a beat or a groove first. But a lot of times my songs come in my sleep.
yeah,
When I wake up, I'll wake up out of my sleep and put on my voice recorder on my phone and write down and sing lyrics or hum melodies or write down what it was about on a napkin or a piece of paper that's on the nightstand. For me, a lot of times, be surprised, a lot of songs come in my sleep. For me,
you
I don't know
know,
about anybody else, but
actually, that's very interesting, and what fascinates about me about that concept, a lot of scientific discovery were part of people's dreams, where they would dream about a snake eating its tail, and they developed and they realized it's a carbon molecule. That
right,
so much creativity comes from the unconscious during sleep. And so the fact that you wake up and you start writing, jotting down things, I'm not surprised, but that's really where so much creativity takes place, is when you're kind of offline,
yes,
and you're in a dream state, and you're really tapping into your soul, uninhibited. Yeah, that's where a lot of great musicians have talked about that, how they, that music has come to them in a dream. So it doesn't surprise me. That's the essence of creativity. It's really,
absolutely.
yeah, it's really interesting. So you started playing in church. That's when you started playing the sax, and I'm sorry, the trombone. And what happened after church? Where did you go with your music from there?
It's interesting. I started hanging out with my friends who were producers and musicians outside of church, and there was a club in Philadelphia, and it still's there. It's called Silk City.
Yeah,
Back in the early '90s, there was a Monday nights at Silk City was called Back to Basics Night, and it was hosted by DJ King Britt, uh, one of the DJs for Diggable Planets. He was a DJ for Diggable Planets, the legendary hip hop group, and DJ King Britt and Dazia, and they had this really cool concept of just playing all kinds of incredible grooves and hip hop music, and um, it was the music that he chose was so uh, so moving, and it was $5 to get in. It was a soul food buffet, which was included in the $5, and the band uh, would play back and forth off of the DJ. So the DJ would play for a while and spin, and the DJ would play a song, and the band would pick it up. There were no songs being played, almost no songs, no cover songs, or no songs were being played. The band was just playing. Well, the band was playing cover songs. The band would pick up grooves from what the
right,
DJ was playing and pick it up from there. And we would create melodies. That's why I met Philadelphia trumpet jazz player, great jazz player out of Philadelphia named Jafar Barron, and it was his band. I was just hanging out. I just wanted to go somewhere where I could play, and before I knew it, I joined the band, and there was no rehearsals. They just like, man, bring your horn. I bought my horn, and he threw me in the fire. And
was this?
in Philly, we have this thing called vibing, and it's basically when the drummer plays, the bass player, you know, plays a really cool bass line. The keyboard player comes in off that bass line. The guitar player comes in off that bass line. And then the horns, we create melodies from scratch. It's almost like we're basically creating songs and grooves from scratch,
Right.
from the top of the dome, as we say. From the top of the dome, we're creating and vibing and creating these movements and creating melodies, bridges, and everything.
Hmm.
You know? And that's something that we did, and something that I learned from Jafar, something I learned being in that space, just walking into a space where we're all going to create from scratch. And when we finished, by the time we were done our set, the DJ would find something that was similar to what we were playing, tempo and all, and be lockstep with the band. And he would start spinning, and we would fade out, and the DJ would start his set. And also when we came back for our set, the same thing. He would play kind of like a song, a funk song that kind of had some horns in it, and we would jump right in, and he would fade out, and we would fade right up in. It was such an amazing, freeing and liberating experience musically. It was an incredible spiritual experience to just create with your brothers on stage.
Were you doing this when you were in high school?
Oh no, this was in the early '90s. I graduated high school in '87.
Okay, so before you started doing this, did you play in a high school band?
I did play a little bit in the high school band. I did. Not a lot, but I did play in the high school band, because for me, the high school band, they were reading music.
Right.
Something I couldn't do. So I would be in there listening to what they were playing and picking it up.
Well, that's what I was kind of trying to get at. Did you learn to read it formally at all in high school? I guess you didn't.
No, I didn't. Not at all. I took lessons later in my career. I took lessons later in my career, but I was just picking up. I could play anything I can hear. Anything I can hear, I can play it. If I hear it, I can play it.
So, and you got that ear from your dad, I guess, from his
Absolutely.
tutor. Yeah.
Absolutely. Because my father couldn't read music either.
Yeah. Well, okay. So you played in the club. You learned, to improvise and to create. Then at some point you ended up going to a record label. I think your first label was your first label Hidden Beach Recordings. Is that your first label?
So a lot happened in between that time. So being at Silk City and being on the Philly music scene, I met these producers, these 6 producers: Andre Harris, Vidal Davis, Keith Peltzer, Darren Henson, Carvin Higgins, Ivan Barrios. These 6 producers were, I guess the nickname was the Misfits. These were the 6 producers who were the producers that worked at A Touch of Jazz Productions, which was DJ Jazzy Jeff's production house.
Gotcha. Okay.
From there, that's when I began to go hang out in the studio down at A Touch of Jazz and go from room to room and work with these producers on albums and records and different artists they were working with and all of that. And one day, I heard them working on some music from an artist, a poet, who I would jump in with bands with and put together bands for, named Jill Scott. And I heard the music records, and it was like, this is Jill Scott's music. And I was like, my girl, my homie Jill Scott, like, Jill Scott sings? We never knew she could sing. But, I heard the music and I was like, wow. So, for me, it wasn't really about trying to get paid. I just wanted to be in the moment and play on as many records as I could. So that's what I did. Me and Jafar Barron, the trumpet player, we went from room to room and we played on as many songs as we could. Now, obviously, playing with Jill Scott, playing on all of those records. Once Jill got her record deal, once she was signed to Hidden Beach Recordings, then I went on, I went on to tour with her and went on to tour with her for many years. But after the first couple of years of touring with her, obviously I got to meet Steve McKeever, who was the president of Hidden Beach Recordings. And Jill told Steve that, Jeff is working on some music, some solo album stuff. You probably need to take a listen. And I have been working in the studio with some good friends of mine. And Will Brock was the first person. Producer, keyboardist, pianist, Will Brock was the first person to take me in the studio. excuse me, got a little tickle in my throat. And the first song I recorded was "Can You Come Over," a song that features Carol Riddick, Philly Songbird, also background singer for Jill Scott at the time. And to this day, she's a great solo artist and tours with Will Downing. But that's how I got the deal at Hidden Beach. I came through. That was my journey through that. Through those playing with those producers, playing on Jill Scott records, going on tour with Jill Scott, and eventually being introduced to Steve McKeever.
But you did your own debut album, Bone Deep. That was with Hidden Beach?
Yes, Bone Deep. What a group! I mean, that Bone Deep was a masterpiece. Steve McKeever he gave me creative freedom. He knew. I don't think he really knew at the time that I had the relationships that I had with. I could call these artists, and I think I called every musician in the city to come to the studio to work on this album. I used so many musicians, so many people. And I started calling all of my artist friends, starting with the first single with Jill Scott, a very hot Floetry, Glenn Lewis, Gerald Veasley, even Darius Rucker. Darius Rucker, who had just signed a one album deal with Hidden Beach, who was a good friend of mine, got on the record. And Dombey. I mean, it was Bone Deep is a masterpiece.
It got terrific reviews when it came out. I mean, I remember that album actually.
Yeah.
I've always loved jazz and blues. That's always been my home. So I remember Bone Deep. It was really groundbreaking in a lot of ways. The music was just so.
It was the kind of Robert Glasper kind of album long before Robert Glasper.
Yeah.
It was an album of a soul jazz kind of artist with features from some smooth jazz artists, a soul artist, a neo soul artist. All of these great artists that I had on the album. I was doing albums like that then. 2003, next year, Bone Deep will be into 2023. Bone Deep will be 20 years old.
I know.
The 20th anniversary of my first album. Wow.
Yeah. Tell me something. I'm still so curious about the trombone. What can you do with a trombone that a trumpet player or sax player can't do? What is it that makes that sound so unique?
First of all, it's the size of the instrument, because it's a warm tenor voice. Because the instrument that I play, my trombone it's a tenor trombone, so it's very close to the human voice because of the slide, the way I play it, the way I approach it. It's the slide that makes the difference. The slide and the tone of the horn sets it apart from any other instrument in the world.
Well, usually when you think of frontmen, for a band, you think of sax players or trumpet players. You don't think of trombone players, but that's the unique space that you were building. That a trombone artist can be the lead.
I mean, absolutely. And especially, because obviously there have been great band leaders, great trombone artists in jazz, and like the J.J. Johnsons and Fred Wesley, who went on to have his own bands, and obviously went on to have R&B single, House Party, to be a solo artist. So I'm not the first. Fred Wesley was one, and I'm talking about not just a band leader, but a trombone artist in mainstream music. Right. Not just a jazz artist. Because I don't consider myself a jazz artist. I didn't start in the jazz clubs. I didn't learn to play trombone through the traditional way, through jazz standards. And even though I love and appreciate and respect it all and listen to it and can listen to it constantly, I consider myself more of a soul artist, a soul music artist, or a soul jazz artist, that plays trombone. I have so much respect for a lot of my friends are great jazz trombonists. Vincent Gardner, Wycliffe Gordon. These guys are so, these guys are, Saunders Sermons. These are some amazing, and I'm talking about my peers. These guys are just incredible jazz trombonists. I think they put me in the jazz category maybe because of the instrument. Some of my songs, I think, fall under jazz. Soul of the Bahia, I'll Always Think of You. I mean, there's some really beautiful songs that I've played. Um, Humbly, I say that. But I'm a soul baby. You know, I'm a soul hip hop baby. So I don't know how it's like inside of me, I'm a soul hip hop baby. So when I play and I create music, that's what my mind is on. My mind is thinking where that beat is. The beat needs to feel like hip hop. The beat needs to feel like hip hop. But the melodies, the choruses, everything needs to feel like soul music and gospel because that's where I come from. That's who I am. You know.
Well, yeah, that was part of my real interest in having you on the show because, I mentioned we play jazz. I call it jazz confusion, because we've had jazz reggae artists on, and you fit so perfectly into the jazz, hip hop, R&B, soul crossover. I mean, and that's really, I think, what really fascinates me is, how someone can move into the different genres so smoothly and integrate them, and then integrate them into an instrument like the trombone. It's not to me, it's just not an easy thing to do, and that's really
Right.
unique. So your approach is really so interesting. So what did you do? Okay, after your breakout album, what came next? What did you start working on?
Well, what happened for me was, I was ready to record another album. But when you're on a small indie label
Right.
with one really big fish in a small pond, which I consider Hidden Beach was a small pond, and Jill Scott was the big fish, I was trapped. I had to wait because they're holding the budget
Right.
for whatever Jill Scott's going to do next. So I had to wait 9 years
Mm.
to release another album after my first album. So what I did was I went on tour. And in those 9 years, I did tour. I toured with Jill. I was the musical director for Floetry. I toured with The Roots. I toured with Kurt Franklin. I toured with Jay-Z.
Wow.
I toured with Mary J. Blige. I was busy.
Yeah.
I toured with Tyler Perry. Uh, so I was busy touring the world, and so I had to wait 9 years until the budget freed up for me to record my second album, which was
Were you-
Bon Appetit.
Right. Were you writing all this time anyway? Were you still composing?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I was ready to go. By the time it was time for the album to come out, I was ready to go because I had so many concepts and so many things that happened. I got married. Um, I had another child. Um, so a lot was going on in my life. During that time, I got married and divorced in that span. I got married, was married for 5 years. I had a beautiful son. But in the midst of that time, I was touring, got married, got divorced, and all of that time happened while I still was waiting to put out another album. But boy, did that give me so much material for that album.
I'm sure that's what I was wondering. I'm sure you were composing all that time too.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
Bon Appetit come before. I know you had an illness that I wanted to talk about and how that may have affected your music. Did Bon Appetit come out before or after you went through your illness?
Far before I released two albums before my illness.
So it
It
was
was Bon Appetit.
2013 was your next album. Is that
Yeah,
right?
so yeah, 2013, Bone Deep
Right.
came out, and then 2015, Jeff Bradshaw and Friends Home
Right.
live album came out, and then I fell ill in 2016.
Right. So what was different about Bradshaw and Friends from Bon Appetit, or what were you transitioning? What were you how would you explain your evolution as a musician, as an artist?
It was my third album. Um, I've always created albums like movies. I always wanted to make my albums events. I just want to be like, oh, it's a really cool album. The tunes are cool. I want people to feel that way. I want people to feel like when you listen to a Jeff Bradshaw album, it's an event. So people always said to me, man, I love your music, man. I really love your music. But when I see you live, that's when I totally get who you are, like to my bones. So I decided to do a live album, but not just any live album. I was going to bring in some of the most creative and amazing people to be a part of a live album. I swing for the fences. So I called Najee and Will Downing and Kenny Lattimore and Trombone Shorty and Kim Burrell and Take Six and Tweet and Robert Glasper and Eric Roberson and all of my great friends to join me for one night at one of the most prestigious venues in Philadelphia, the Kimmel Center. Where the Philadelphia Orchestra plays. And one of the most prestigious, one of the most beautiful venues, probably the most beautiful venue in our city, and bring 5,800 people from Philadelphia in front of my hometown fans and do something that's never been done before. And that was to be the first African-American artist to record a live album on that stage. And live album with multi-Grammy award-winning huge artists, And I probably have a few extra gray hairs from that process. But man, we had a 15 piece band, 12-piece string ensemble, and a room full of Philadelphia love. And we created this great work. Man, what a great day.
Yeah, that's really incredible. I know a lot of the artists that you mentioned that you had perform with you, Najee in particular. I have friends. My friends are Pieces of a Dream.
Of course.
James Lloyd and Curtis Harmon, and
those are my big brothers.
Yeah, and Najee, of course, records with them in the studio on occasion too. So, you had a tremendous array of super talented artists for that live performance. So it was really quite remarkable. So okay, so now you have this major piece of music out there, and you get ill. What happened?
Probably 20 plus years of eating like crap. Eating like crap on the road, touring the world, eating any and everything that I wanted, not being responsible with my eating. And diverticulitis was the boogeyman. It was the monster that came to get me and to change my life. It was diverticulitis. For those who don't know, diverticulitis is when blood-filled pockets form on the walls of your diverticula in your large intestines, and it stores food because you have a lack of fiber in your diet. You're just eating pizza and wings and steak and pasta and whatever, but not enough salad and green vegetables. A lot of that food stays in your large intestines and rots, and blood-filled pockets form on the walls of your on the walls of your large intestines, and it's beyond painful, and it causes you to hemorrhage on the inside, and not my finest hour.
Sure.
It changed my life, and like the worst part of it for me was not just being sick, but being a musician who's toured the world, who's made a lot of money, who's done really well, toured with some of the biggest artists in the world. The one thing that slipped through the cracks was I didn't have health insurance.
Wow. Okay.
So now, trying to keep up with medical bills, now I'm broke. I spent all my money, medical bills, trying to keep up my life, kids in school, trying to keep myself together and take care of this horrible intestinal disease, and I lost it all. I lost it all. But thank God that I had amazing people in my life. You know, I don't use the word friend lightly. I don't throw that word around because you don't really know who your friends are
Yeah.
until you're on your knees and you need somebody to pick you up. And a really good friend of mine, former head of A&R at Hidden Beach Recordings, Charles Whitfield, really good friend of mine, really good brother. He reached out and was happening. He contacted Jill Scott. And Jill said, well, we're going to launch a GoFundMe page for you. We're going to let people love on you. You know, we're going to let the world love on you. Those are her words. But I was very reluctant. I did not want to do this GoFundMe thing. I didn't like it at all. And Jill said, you've given your whole life, almost your whole life, to the people of the world and sharing your gift. Let people love on you. And so I did. So we launched the GoFundMe page. And then part 2 was Jill was going to launch a benefit concert for me. And she did. And everybody, almost every musician or artist that I've worked with, they all came. Everybody from Philadelphia. As many people didn't get in that place. It was about 1,500 people into the TLA in Philadelphia. And news people, everybody just packed that place. And every artist, so many artists, Robert Glasper, Bilal, the Baylor Project, Mesa, Kenny Latimer, so many people were there for me. A good friend of mine, a big concert promoter out of Washington, D.C. named Darryl Brooks. I call him Uncle Darryl because he's like one of my mentors. He surprised me and brought DJ Cool and Sugar Bear, the leader of EU from D.C. And it was such an amazing night. Kendrick the Family Soul was there. It was just so many people. Demont Pender, an incredible artist, live abstract artist out of DC who paints live on stage, painted a picture of me during the concert.
Wow.
And you can't see it. It's on my wall. And I wish I could turn my laptop around so you could actually see the picture. Can I do that?
Sure. Yeah, if you want to, go ahead. You know, you mentioned Mesa. Mesa's my artist of the week this week.
Oh, that's my girl.
Yeah, she's fabulous. I've known Mesa for a while. There. Oh, wow, that's great. That's great.
A big picture. That's the picture he painted.
That's amazing.
On stage that night. With the cigar in my mouth, of course. But I just wanted to share it because not too many people come into my home. So only people that come into my home have seen the picture, or the people that were there that night. I took it home and I put it on my wall so that, sometimes, you always want to be reminded, but sometimes you plug his laptop back up. Sometimes you need to remember, from whence you've come.
For sure.
You gotta remember from whence you come.
You were down for a while, a couple of years, wasn't it, until you were fully recovered?
About a year, a little over a year, and I lost about 62 pounds, and I had to learn how to eat all over again. And so no seeds, no nuts, no corn, no seeds, nuts, or corn, because those are the things that don't
digest. Yeah,
they don't digest. Like seeds go in, they go one way and come out the same. Corn goes in and comes out the same. Your body doesn't digest those things.
So after you recovered, what was your next project?
So After I recovered, and shout out to every club and promoter that came and looked out for me. I worked more 2017, 18, 19 than I worked probably some of my whole career, just from every talent buyer and every festival and every club owner all over the country. Once they knew that they had heard that I was back to work and that I was healthy, I worked so much. Everybody called, every club called, every festival called,
It's great.
And I'd worked more in those 3 years than I'd worked just being back. It was just the love and the people coming to see me. It's been like, man, we're so glad you're okay. And we're so glad it was just that feeling. And the next album came Stronger.
Stronger. That's where I was heading.
Stronger
Yeah.
came.
A coincidental name?
I'm sorry?
A coincidental name?
Absolutely no coincidence at all. It was no coincidence. It was not a comeback record, but it was a comeback record.
Exactly.
It was a comeback album. It was I'm back, stronger, playing my best trombone, writing some of the strongest songs with some amazing artists. This is stronger than the last album.
Right.
Everything about me and my life is stronger. And releasing it 4 days before releasing it in the middle of a pandemic, 4 days before one of the most important elections of our time.
Mm-hmm.
4 days before Election Day.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, you were working at that time with some incredible artists. You were working with Raheem Devon, right, and Robert Glasper and Glenn Lewis and Frank McComb during
Yeah,
that period. Yeah,
Amber, the lead singer of Moonchild.
yeah,
So many people on that album, man. Christian McBride. James Poyser. We from the Roots, Philadelphia, incredible producer. I was so blessed to work with so many people. Mickey Miller's on that album, an incredible underground artist, one of the most talented people I know. I was just blessed to work on that album. Lynn Roundtree, Markwell Jordan. It's just, I was blessed to work on that album, to have people come work with me on that album, like all of them. But this album was special because it was me coming back from a very terrible illness. It was me
there's a
showing
connection.
that, yeah,
There's a connection in that
I had
album.
staying power.
Is there a connection in that album to Stevie Wonder and to Donny Hathaway too? Or am I wrong?
Absolutely. That's what Glenn Lewis and Frank McComb.
Yeah.
We had to do that song. We had to do that. It was something about that song that I've always loved. People have always loved that song, And Stevie, Glenn Lewis had always been compared to Stevie Wonder. Frank McComb had always been compared to Donny Hathaway.
Yes.
It was a marriage made in heaven,
Yeah.
And I recorded this album at the Great Hampton Studios, owned by Jazzy Jeff, the Great Hampton Studios. Hampton Studios in Bear, Delaware, a studio owned by the great Jazzy Jeff. Again, even after all of these years, my big brothers and my friends are always there to help me on this incredible journey to take this instrument, continue to take this instrument to the next level and mainstream.
You also released a single, I think, about that time, I Do Sincerely.
Yes. I Do Sincerely, featuring Marsha Ambrosius, who's also on the album, who's on every album. Marsha's on every album. But yes, Marsha Ambrosius, a song she wrote that I produced called I Do Sincerely. It's a favorite. We did it on the live album. We did it live on the live album, but I had never released the studio version of the album because we did studio version first. And then I decided to do a live album. So we shelved it. We just let it sit for a while. We put it in the crock pot. And then when it was time to release the new album, Marsha said, you should release the studio version of I Do Sincerely. And that's what I did. And I'm so glad that I did. People love that song.
Yeah, it's a great track, a super track. And you also got to work with Christian McBride and also with James Poyser, right?
I had to pay tribute to the master teacher, Herbie Hancock.
Herbie Hancock. Yeah.
You know, it was. I mean, he's the master teacher, and I don't even know if he knows who I am, but I'm
I'm sure he
somebody
does.
that has been a fan of his since the '80s, and Butterfly is one of my favorite
Yeah.
songs
Yeah.
by him. And I thought, you know, James is a quasi distant protege of Herbie Hancock. I'm sure Christian McBride has played with Herbie Hancock,
Yeah.
and it was great to have my Philly brother, the amazing award-winning Mr. Christian McBride, play fretless bass on that song with me. It was an honor.
That's terrific. That's you produced some really terrific tracks along the way.
Thank
You know,
you.
a question: before your illness, after your illness, did it change your music at all, or change your approach to music, or what was important to you? You know, after going through that period, or were you still the same person basically?
I That's a very good question. I am very purposeful about every song and every album that I make sure that when I'm no longer here, that people will always know that I was purposeful about the songs, the approach, the artist that I chose. But after my illness, I became even more purposeful, not taking anything for granted, and 10 times more purposeful about my music after my illness. Absolutely.
You know, purposeful is an interesting phrase. You know, I've heard Bruce Springsteen use that phrase that you know, when he every song he does, he's obsessive about it for the very same reason that you gave, that his music, he said, isn't just about him, it's what occurs after him and what that music will represent down the road. You know, and you know, so everything has to be crafted so perfectly. You know, you know, and that's what really makes a great artist great, because their music, they're thinking of their music not just when they're performing it, but what people will think about it after they performed it.
Right.
You know, and you know, that's just an important attribute, you know, to people that are very successful in the in the industry. It's not just the fact that I got a record contract, I did a record. It's what the record represents when it represents them. You know, long after they've all recorded or produced it.
Right.
Yeah. So, you know, that's what makes musicians, you know, really great and inspires them to go on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk about the next thing that I was very interested in. It was Cape Town, South Africa.
Mm, what
What
a
do you tell everybody about that
great, great,
experience?
what a great song.
Yeah.
Produced by Daniel Crawford from Oakland, California. Musical director for Raphael Sadiq. Um, Great friend of mine. I knew the concept of the song that I wanted to do after playing the Cape Town Jazz Festival with Jill Scott and walking the streets of Cape Town. I've always wanted to record a song that spoke to where I'm from. As an African American, I think it's really always necessary to, at some point in your career, to record and pay homage to where you're from, you know, where your ancestors come from, to know who you are. And it was so important for me. Like I said, I was purposeful on this album about making sure I wanted to do a song that I could pay tribute to my homeland. And after going to Cape, and I've been to Cape Town and Senegal and Johannesburg, there was something about Cape Town, Table Mountain. I mean, it's just a beautiful city. The people were just so beautiful. I talked to Daniel Crawford about the song, and he produced the track and sent me the track, and I was like, this is exactly what I want. This is perfect. And man, we got into that thing. I really, it's one of my favorites on that album. Cape Town was a really great movement, and called in my boy Mike Burton, great
Right.
saxophonist out of
Right.
Atlanta, Georgia, who we tour together with Patty Bell right now, and he's on a couple songs on the album. Great, great, great sax player. We got into that. It's definitely one of my favorites. And then I got a group from West Africa. I was like, man, the video needs to be in Africa. I either need to go to Africa or I need to shoot the video in Africa of some young, beautiful African dancers. And so that's what I did. We got the video shot in Ghana, and it came out so good. I was so happy.
Yeah, it's just a great track and great. It's a very special experience the way you presented it. Also,
Thank you.
So a friend of mine who also had a very strong affinity to South African Cape Town, Paul Simon.
Of course.
Yeah,
Of course. Come on.
yeah,
I
and
bought the
Cape,
DVD. I was so
yeah,
moved. I was
yeah,
so
yeah,
moved by that. I had to buy the DVD because I wanted to not just hear it, I wanted to see it.
see it. Yeah, and having Black Mambasa, perform on that, it
Oh,
was just amazing, amazing.
everybody. Hugh Masekela, Lady
Yeah,
Smith, Black Mabazo,
yeah,
Mary McCabe,
yeah. You remember keeping?
to see that, to see the band Stabella, to actually get to see Ray Pure, his co-writer, and just the way that the Africans, the way that the South Africans approach guitar playing, the melodies, and of course the legendary Pakiti Kumalu on
Yes,
bass.
yeah,
You get to see him play that famous bass solo, that famous bass
yes.
lick on, You Can Call Me Out, It was
Oh
awesome.
yeah, I know it was. But Cape Town has a very special place. A lot of contemporary music, and it isn't acknowledged often enough. Um, but it
I
really,
agree.
yeah, it holds a very special place. So, you gave it a great tribute to it, and
Thank
wonderful
you.
song. It's terrific. You know, Jeff, when you look around the music industry today, you've been playing for 3 decades, and you look around and you see changes. First of all, in the music itself, music evolved from jazz and blues into rock and into, and you see R&B involved into soul and neo soul and hip hop, and all these, and then this changes in technology from analog to digital, from records to tape to CDs, and now it's fully digitized and streaming. um, when you look around all throughout your career, what do you think of the music industry today? Do you think it's in a good place? Do you think we've lost something? I'm a big fan of John Batiste.
Oh, me too.
Yeah,
Me too.
because the guy is so talented, and he respects the old music tremendously.
He does.
So does Bruno Mars. Another person who just has a deep respect, and they sample very often. A lot of the great sounds from the '70s and '60s. So
Right.
when you look around, what do you think of the contemporary music industry and where the industry is today compared to where it was when you started? Do you think it's in a better place, or what's your feeling about
That's a very good question. I think creatively for the creatives, speaking for the creatives, um, I think it's in a great place for us because you now don't need a record company to put your music out. You don't have to run around and be creative and run to big record companies with a CD or a tape and say sign me. Because of distribution, because of digital distribution, you can record your music and put your music out. That part of it, I think, puts us in a better place. The fact that streaming is robbing us blind.
it? Yes, that's what I was looking at. That's where I was
Oh my
going with this.
God.
Yeah,
Remember, my first album came out in 2003. There was no streaming.
yeah.
Before iTunes, before iPhones. You know, uh, we're getting robbed blind. We're getting devastated uh, economically that way.
Yes.
So you got the digital platforms, and everybody has a better way to get their music out because of social media. You create fans there, and then drive them to your, to your music digitally. That's a great thing. Um, but then you have that. So now they found a way to kill us there, and the rate for streaming is so awful.
It's 0.0008 cents per play. Yeah, I mean it's ridiculous, and this is there's been several people in the music industry that Neil Young, for example, that hates digitized music because it destroys the heart, the sound of the music, the richness. He really has a problem with how it's being digitized and streamed.
Right.
And then you have people like Sheryl Crow, who are really, so much of the music now that's being streamed is so formulaic. It's done with a computer. It's not done with a musician and a lyricist anymore. It's a team of people, looking for the hook and looking for the chorus that's really developed, by an algorithm. And that I think that's where it's going, because your music is so textured and so rich, and there's a very small space for that anymore. You're right. People can be creative and they can get their music out. But the advantage to the record label was when they got behind you, they gave you studio time. They put you on tour. And even though obviously, you look at Little Richard, and the fact that so many black musicians were never paid crap for all the music they produced.
Correct.
So it hasn't changed in that sense. Now streaming robs you before the record companies robbed you. So
right, yeah, streaming, you get killed streaming.
Yeah,
I mean that's why a lot of us, instrumentalists, that's why we print up, we have CDs made.
Yeah.
We still have CDs made because it helps when you play shows, and we do well, but if you could take and sell 50 CDs at a show,
yeah,
it makes sense. It helps to make sense.
Sure.
But I would never crap on technology. I mean, technology is what it is. We still can create, and with analog outboard gear and ribbon microphones, and we still can create this music and get it recorded and mixed and mastered the right way, so it doesn't lose its integrity. Because
that's right.
It's because of technology that music can go around the world. Somebody in Budapest, Romania, can listen to my single tonight.
Yeah.
Because of it.
Internet radio, the station that you're on tonight, Source Radio, we broadcast globally to 38 million people in 145 countries. Before you had an FM station, it went 50 miles and that was it.
That was it.
But now, hundreds of thousands of people are tuning in and listening to you tonight, and your music can be heard globally now. So you're absolutely right. In terms of the technology being able to advance creativity, clearly it's there, but it's become harder to monetize a career. I mean, so many musicians, have to always maintain a full-time job or another job besides playing music, and they can't really do what they really want to do. And the only way to do it is to perform. That's
correct.
That's the way to make music and make money, to monetize.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, so anyway, I was just curious to see how you felt about the music industry today, compared to where it was. So tell me now, 5 years from now, Jeff, where do you see yourself? Where do you see your music, and what do you see yourself performing? What kind of music do you think you'll be doing 5 years out?
5 years from now, let me see. 5 years from now would be well. I guess I can say this now. Well, I guess this would be the first place that I mention it, that I am halfway done my new album.
Oh, terrific.
Nobody knows this.
Terrific.
I haven't put it on social media. I haven't talked about it, but I'm halfway done my new album.
Wonderful. I'm glad to hear it.
So due out in the spring. and it's the 20th anniversary uh, of my first album, Bone Deep. So I'm not gonna tell you the name of the album, but I am about halfway done, and it's going really well. And but 5 years from now, I hope to have out my dream album, and my dream album is to be able to record all of my songs, an album of songs that I choose from every album with an orchestra,
Oh, wow, great.
with a symphony orchestra. I want to record my album. I want to record an album with an orchestra, and I want to record it live.
Wow, that's great. That's great.
That's my dream.
And that,
That's
you
what I
know,
want.
I think Jeff, not only is that project worthwhile, but that's where music's heading again. Music's heading back into bigger bands, more instrumentation. Um, you know, um, you know, for a long time, smooth jazz was kind of on the downside, and now it's making a comeback. And I mentioned people like John Batiste. That there's a need amongst young people for
Absolutely.
more diversity in music than they're getting.
Yes.
They want to hear more of the kind of music that you're putting out and you're performing. So
Right.
I think you're heading in a perfect direction.
Thank you.
I appreciate you telling everybody on our show tonight about your forthcoming new album. Get the word out to everybody.
It's the first time I've spoken about it.
I,
Nobody knows.
I appreciate that a lot. Thank you. A last kind of question for you, and I don't want you to make any enemies here. If you had to,
Oh,
if you had to pick two people on your bucket list that you would love to be on stage with, playing with, who would those two people be tonight?
two people on my bucket list,
Yeah, that you would love to play with,
people that are alive.
preferably.
Uh, um, well, I'm a huge fan of Kurt Whalum.
Wow. Okay.
I'm
Good.
such a huge fan of Kurt Whalum. And I would love to do a record. I would love to do a song. Um, I would love to do a song with Lenny Kravitz.
Oh, wonderful. I love Lenny Kravitz. Most underrated guitar player on the planet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. I love your two picks. I love them. Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope it comes true. I'd love to hear it.
I believe it will.
Yeah, that would
The
be
sky's the
fantastic.
limit. There's nothing I've wanted to do that musically and recording music that I haven't been able to do. I only walk through the doors that are open for me.
What words would you have to close out our interview? Pretty much, what words would you have for your fans or people listening into you for the first time that you want them to take away from you know who you are, Jeff, and what your music represents? What is it that you want to tell people?
I'm a father of five beautiful children. God is so first in my life. And I am what I am because of God's blessings. The pathway that I've walked with a trombone and mainstream music, being self-taught. There's no college or institution that can take credit for my talent or my gift or my albums. Everything I have comes from God, the blessings that He gave me in my mother's womb. Um, I believe that you can do anything you want to do. I'm trailblazing in a lane by myself. There's no other Jeff Bradshaws. I don't compare myself to anybody because there's nobody to compare me to. No, I'm in my own lane, and somebody will compare me to somebody later. But I love being a trailblazer. I love being in my own lane and not having to listen to music to figure out, listen to what everybody else is doing to try to figure out what I should do. I should do whatever I feel. And any other young creative in this business, you should do exactly what you feel.
Great, wonderful, wonderful advice for people, especially people coming up in the music industry today. Be true to yourself is what you're saying, and
Absolutely.
and that's a good place to be. Let me
Absolutely.
pull this. Let me pull this up on the screen so we can tell people if they want to reach you. Why don't you tell people a little bit about how they can contact you?
Oh yeah. On Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I am Jeff Bradshaw. I am Jeff Bradshaw. The website's there. I post every day on social media where I'm going to be, what I'm doing. Uh, I rarely post myself cooking hamburgers and all. Most of my posts are about my travels, my tours with Patti LaBelle, um, and what it's like to be a musician that has been at this now for on this road and playing this music around for 27 years. It's truly been a blessing. So follow me and check out my music. Jeff Bradshaw is everywhere in iTunes, wherever you stream music, Pandora, iTunes, Apple Music, wherever you stream music. And just you can start with any album you want to start with. But I think you should start with Bone Deep, start with the beginning, and see the progression of my music. Thank you so
Wonderful,
much for having me. This was
wonderful. One
truly a pleasure.
last thing: any places you're going to be performing you want to tell people about? Anything
Well, this
special?
weekend in Philly is all sold out. My next show on the road is December 29th. I'll be at the St. James Live for a pre-New Year's Eve celebration concert. St. James Live in Atlanta, Georgia. In Atlanta, Georgia. December 29th, St. James Live in Atlanta. Let's go.
Wonderful, wonderful, Jeff. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm glad we had a chance to do this finally.
Yeah, absolutely. We
So
got it done.
yeah,
We stayed with it.
yeah, we did. And I want to have you back again. So
Please.
yeah, we will, and you'll be coming up as one of our featured artists also on Source Radio. And
Thank you.
again, it was a pleasure. So you take care of yourself, and we're looking forward to more great music from you.
Thank you so very much for having me. This was fun.
Wonderful. Good night, Jeff.